Could you say a little bit about the relationship of jazz to European classical music as an influence upon European classical music?
Yeah, in some of the obvious people, Mio, who listened to a lot of jazz when he came over and was taken to Harlem and
La Creation of the Moon.
Right, yeah, he wrote that. And earlier, Debussy, who was really excited by the ragtime that he heard and did pieces which really indicated his approval of that solution to certain musical problems. And on the other hand, you have people today like John Lewis who use traditional 18th century forms and write 20th century jazz. And I mean, you know. So you've got a man who is writing a piece of music in kind of a Bachian feeling in tribute to a French gypsy guitarist who is certainly was certainly living proof of the fact that you didn't have to be black to be not only a great jazz musician but a big influence on jazz.
You use language analogies often when you talk about jazz. Can you expound upon that a little bit more about the jazz language and the syntax, and what exactly are you meaning when you make those references?
Well, jazz is a repertory, as you pointed out. There's a large group of songs that codify the improvisatory practices as they evolve during ragtime, during swing, during bebop, and during various periods of jazz. Since that is one aspect that formalizes what those things are, then the things that make up the nuts and bolts of that music are the vocabulary. And the vocabulary is handled in the same way that the verbal vocabulary is. There's a beginning and a middle of an end and an end to your statement. I mean, you say, it starts somewhere, goes somewhere, and ends, you know. And the whole idea of how do you do something like that? Does it have to be... Now, I have a particular rhythmic framework when I do something like that. I'm hearing harmony, rhythm, and melody as I play that, even though it's not obvious to someone else. In my mind, as my point of reference, is a specific melodic direction, which is accented by how I handle the rhythm, and sort of determined by what harmonies, if any, I have in mind, so that I know it goes from this point to that point to that point.
Could you demonstrate how, even though the syntax and the grammar of the language has remained the same, how the increase or the change in the vocabulary has affected the music?
Oh, sure. One of the things that happens, for instance, up until the 40s in piano playing, your left hand as a pianist really set the pace. You did, which is called stride piano, or you did some variation of that, or swing bass. Which is walking bass, which means that on each of the 4 beats there's a note. Sometimes you play the combination of it. You know, so that you break it up with a chord. But by the time, so if you were playing a melody by James P. Johnson, now, the bass, that's the basic rhythm. So, now, if I were to play that today, you know, it's the same harmonic kind of thing, but instead of playing, I'm just indicating, and all of the rhythm is in my right hand. I mean, the rhythmic information. You know, So that was a part of the stylistic progress. I usually demonstrate that a little differently by taking a song that's not jazz and taking something like Three Blind Mice and saying, okay, since it's not jazz, I have to alter it and make it into jazz. And by doing that, I have to use that vocabulary that I use when I improvise. And so I have as a point of reference another kind of harmony. I might do it. Now, most people would say, well, what's that got to do with Three Blind Mice? You know, and what it has to do is my point of reference was this melody. I used a different harmony. I used a different rhythm. I used everything was different. But that was what the nucleus of that idea was. So that I had a certain basis for making that kind of a musical statement. Doesn't make it any better. Doesn't make it. It's just another point of view.
Another point of reference. Mostly you talked about there the rhythmic vocabulary and how it shifts from
right.
left-hand accompaniment to right-hand implication. But the pitches that you actually played with your right hand sounded much different.
Oh, yeah.
Between the original J.P. Johnson and your version in a more contemporary Billy Taylor interpretation of that melody. How would you go about defining those differences in terms of the vocabulary?
Well, one difference is the harmonic reference. Dizzy Gillespie says that when he discovered this chord, which is, for those who are musically inclined, just to take the parts of the chord, that's a triad. This is the 7th, 9th, the 11th, which I raised, and the 13th. So Dizzy says when he heard that, almost instantly he had this melody in mind. So harmonically, things can be suggested. Dizzy also learned this kind of progression. And he's... So the kinds of things that make those notes different are the harmonic underpinnings of those ideas.